Okay, here we go. My guest today, technology entrepreneur, founder of ClientLook, the CRM system, and someone who just has a ton of experience in the real estate and data space. Here today, Michael Griffin.
Hey, Bob, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for being here this morning.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. Well, your story is so amazing. I want to kind of take us back a little bit into the past. You're actually a two-time CRM startup founder. And I think it started as you were a broker originally. So take us back. This would probably be into the 90s, early 90s, maybe even, on how you got into the business initially.
Well, so I grew up in the Midwest, and I moved to Los Angeles specifically to get into commercial real estate. So I wanted to be a commercial real estate broker and live the California dream. And when I started, it was right in the advent of like using computers. So there were a couple of guys in my office who used computers, and the more established guys told me that's a waste of time. You got to develop your book and your Rolodex. And if you're using a computer, that's a waste. But my handicap was I didn't know the streets. I didn't know the geography. I didn't know the history of any buildings because I hadn't grown up here. So I had no real way to like categorize and assimilate and store all that information in a way that could really benefit me. So I got a computer and I started using the old ACT system. The old desktop ACT database. And I eventually customized it and created a little add-on for my own use. And then had a lot of interest from people in my office and realized, hey, there's a business around this. So I left brokerage after about 4 or 5 years and started a company that marketed this ACT-based commercial real estate system. And then eventually 4 or 5 years later, sold that to CoStar. And then I spent many years at CoStar.
So as an entrepreneur, was there a time where it really became real? Did you ever have that moment like, maybe money started coming in, maybe it was just you saw some kind of a need that you were feeling? Did you have that kind of feeling where I may be onto something here?
Yeah, that moment for me was a deal that we did with CB Coldwell Banker Commercial back in the day when I used to do these demos where I couldn't afford a laptop. So I used to lug my computer, my desktop computer and a monitor to these demos. And I would go into an office and set up and plug this stuff all in and, brought my keyboard and the whole bit. And one of my key targets was CB at the time. And I got a call from one of our kind of big, passionate users at the time around Christmas to say, oh, I just got out of the board meeting and CB has decided that they're going to adopt Aries. It was called Aries for ACT, Aries nationally. And so you'll be hearing from somebody, in January about, 2,000 seats or something like that. And that was the moment when I thought, wow, this is really real.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, it speaks my language a little bit when, because I'm as an industrial broker, when I first started out too, I remember going around from business park to business park and just writing down tenants, on an Excel. We take it back and put it in an Excel spreadsheet, but I was out there with with a pencil writing down people's names in business parks. So,
yeah, and it's come so far because to me what always inspired me about CRM was the simplest part of it. The fact that I could pull up your record and come up with an understanding of what we spoke about a year ago and rattle off your family members' names, where you went to school, or what, that was such a powerful relationship building tool that I didn't understand why everybody didn't do it. And it doesn't work on paper. It doesn't work in your phone. It needs to be in a database. So everything that I've done since then has built around that primary and fundamental focus of helping commercial real estate professionals build better relationships faster. So
then I think it was in 2007, 2008, you started ClientLook, which was probably the worst time to start anything, right? With the crash happening. So how did that come about? And how did it get off the ground?
Well, I spent a lot of years at CoStar, and eventually got the itch again to start another company. So I left, and I spent a whole year doing nothing other than like kind of trying to come up with the next big business idea. And I wasn't thinking CRM at the time. And in fact, the first incarnation of ClientLook was as a broker to client collaboration tool, hence the name ClientLook. So it was designed to facilitate a broker's communication primarily with a landlord or a tenant during the course of an engagement. So your client wants to know what you're doing for them. So we built this tool that allowed you to kind of key in everything that you did and in real time provide that information to their clients on demand. So the client could log in and see what was going on. And eventually the demand made it really clear that we should be a full-fledged CRM. So we just started chipping away at it. But I started ClientLook entirely on my own. It was a wholly bootstrapped sort of thing. I mean, I didn't know how to go out and raise money. I didn't know how to go out and sort of, leverage an idea to attract capital. I built a business the only way I knew how to, which was to make it as a profitable kind of entity. You don't spend more than you make. You invest a little, you get a return, and then you build a little more, and you just keep chipping away at it. So, we were always profitable. I mean, the sacrifice was not unlike brokerage. I took very little income for several years and paid my employees and everybody else and for the infrastructure. But the interesting thing about 2008, about the time when I started, you're right, it was an awful time in the market, but it was just about the time when like enterprise level infrastructure was finally available to small firms. So in other words, rather than me having to go out and buy a bunch of servers and find a place to host those servers to maintain the ClientLook product, I could go to IBM and for $1,000 a month have the same like server setup as any big company. I mean, obviously on a much smaller scale, but as far as the customer was concerned, it was the same. So that was a really game-changing sort of paradigm shift in the industry that enabled entrepreneurs like me to do what we did.
Right. Interesting. And so skip ahead a little bit, and things have changed so much in the data field with real estate, right? We've got really the third party group, the big company you mentioned, CoStar, that handles, I think, most everybody's data at this point. I'm with a big firm, Savills, and I've been with other large firms. I think everybody uses CoStar. How does that fit in, the whole concept of the third party with all of the data, where everybody gives their data to this third party? How does that affect your business, or just what you've seen over the past several years?
Well, I mean, CoStar is, and I don't think anybody would hesitate to say this, any other entrepreneur, any other company, even if you're an arch rival to CoStar, which we aren't, everybody marvels at CoStar's success and their level of innovation as a tech company. They do amazing things. And my experience there was phenomenal. So I don't have anything negative to say about CoStar. Some of my best friends are former CoStar people. But they have created this sort of stifling walled garden of content that has, obviously propelled their success. But in many ways, it has, unlike the residential market where there's this universal, ubiquitous MLS system where availability is everywhere, and the common means of entering information, is you get a listing agreement, you put your listing in the MLS. That's just part of the way you play. It doesn't work that way in commercial, and they've created this environment where they are the keepers of this data, and they do a great job, and they exact an appropriate fee for it. But it means that as a company we can't really get into that market. We can't exploit there's lots of things that you could do with their data that they don't allow because they don't want integrations with third-party firms. So, but it's not to say there isn't plenty of opportunity, for the rest of us. The one thing that continues to excite me about commercial real estate is, and as I'm sure as you well know, the lack of automation and efficiency that drives the industry in general. And so when you see that kind of stuff, it means there's opportunity to solve these huge problems that just persist year after year. So that's what we're doing at LightBox. We're really pushing hard to innovate some really amazing things.
Isn't it amazing? I think you'll agree with this. I mean, I've been doing this about 20 years now, and you've been in the data space longer than that. Commercial real estate and the brokerage community sometimes is so slow to respond to things. I mean, we're still getting a flyer, doing a brochure, emailing a brochure to somebody. It just feels like there's so much room there for innovation and for new ideas. And I mean, I think it's coming, but I think it's been slow.
You're right. It's been tremendously slow. And the bottom line is that despite all this inefficiency, people still make a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So it's one of those things where it's hard to say to a company that's making a lot of money, hey, you could do better. I could improve your systems, or to say to, someone like yourself, independent contractor, presumably, as most of the industry is, right? To come to you and say, hey, Bob, I can provide you a tool that could save your assistant, 2 to 3 hours a week. Like you don't have an incentive to save, time for other people. It's all about money. You really just care about how can you make more money. That's all that matters. Right.
Right.
And that's fine because that's what you're in it for. But unfortunately, that sort of paradigm sets up inefficiencies even within big companies. So in the past, I had worked with a lot of national firms in data agreements and went to them to say, okay, all we need is all the listings here that you have in downtown Los Angeles, as an example. Can we get those on a spreadsheet? And the truth is that the firms, and I don't think there's any exceptions here, don't have the listings of their own brokers. Their own agents don't tell them about their availability. Because it's almost like an attitude of, you know what, I'll tell you when I get a deal or when it closes or whatever, but don't bother me until then.
Yeah. There's a lot, and I see a lot of that over the years. People get in their own silos. They each have their own business, and sometimes you are partners with one or two people, but it gets very siloed out sometimes, and not everybody knows what everybody's doing all the time.
Yeah, that's why the approach that we have at LightBox is to leave all that listing aggregation of the research up to CoStar, who's got that wired. And what we're trying to do is take CRM, so take ClientLook as an example, and to expand upon it. So use that as the kind of tool that someone uses all day long, and weave into it email marketing capabilities from the RCM system, which is one of our other broker segment products, or mapping information, GIS capabilities, demographics, ownership information that comes from LandVision, which is from Digital Map Products in Irvine up here. So the idea is to take the strengths and the resources that we have in our other products meld those into a whole new system. And the other side of the LightBox business is in environmental and finance, and so there's a lot of synergies that are exciting, especially to me.
So how does it figure, or how does LightBox or ClientLook now fit into the space where a lot of the big firms will have their own CRM systems that everybody uses, and a lot of times they're on a national basis, but I mean, I would agree with you that it really makes you different and sets you apart if you really take advantage or take control of your own data as well.
Yeah, and our goal is not to disrupt or in some way compromise a national firm's policy. But here's one possible outcome. So I don't know, big company like Savills, let's say that they institute a requirement that they want to collect, basically collect your data via Salesforce. So they want you to put your information into the system. So what I would ask them is, what are you looking to do? Well, ultimately, what I've heard from other companies is they want visibility into your pipeline. Right? They're not necessarily looking to steal your data. They don't want your relationship, but they want to be able to run their business, which they have a hard time doing. So, one opportunity for us is, well, what if we could collect their pipeline in such a way that made it, readily available to you, but it wasn't through Salesforce. So perhaps we had a ClientLook-like product that compelled you to put your pipeline in, that then shipped that off to the national, entity, and allowed them to consume that in a way that benefited them. So conceivably, they could save millions of dollars in not having to license Salesforce to every single individual. If in the end, all they really care about is running their business and collecting the data they want, what does it matter how it gets to them? Especially if we can provide a tool that propels your success and ultimately makes you, a better broker.
Right. Interesting. So, ClientLook was acquired by LightBox just, I think, last year. What does that mean to ClientLook? Different services, kind of expands the platform a little bit.
Yeah. So ClientLook was acquired basically in January 2020 by LightBox, and it doesn't mean a lot to current ClientLook users in the sense that we're not spending any time innovating the current platform. All of our resources are going into completely reinventing the product. It's not unlike taking an aging infrastructure and saying, well, let's just rehab this property, as opposed to, let's just buy the land across the street and build a whole new shiny building and move everybody into that. So that's our approach. So we've done security improvements and performance improvements and sort of behind the scenes things within ClientLook to the benefit of all of our subscribers. But the real investment is being made in this new product that I described.
So what's next? A lot of the guys that I talk to, we talk about things like this, doing the video podcasting and videos of buildings and just going into this more high-tech digital age in real estate. What's next for the CRM systems and data in real estate?
Well, I think one of the most important things as it relates to data is I don't know, what I would call personalized data. So in other words, you have a data set that is unique to you somehow. A data set that sets you apart and differentiates your level of service. Because if you think about it, if everybody's using CoStar and everybody represents the same reports and the same availability and the same property information and the same, it doesn't offer me as a potential client, say, a level of faith that, hey, you're going to provide me something different or better than the next guy, right? So why don't I just go with the guy who gave me the cheapest, deal or whatever? So we've done this in ClientLook for many years, where we allow people to create a property module, and then they work for years customizing it. So they correct the inaccuracies of from the original data source. They add their own notes to it. They collect their own photographs, and then they start to create the relationships between those properties. So in your case, it's the tenants in those properties, and the amenities in those buildings, and things that then you identify as having. Or at least being able to demonstrate your unique expertise in whatever territory you've carved out. You are the expert, not only because you can say that you are, but you can demonstrate and show that you are. So that what I think is really what technology is going to start to do in this industry going forward. It's going to help people to differentiate their level of service, because if it doesn't, the evolution of that is what prevents, God forbid, the tenants or the investors or whatever for getting a hold of CoStar and self-serving their need for information. If all you are is the intermediary between that data and the end user, there's the specialness and the value erodes. So the idea is, how do you improve upon that content to really come up with a distinguishing level of service?
One of the things I'm interested to hear your perspective on this, being a tenant broker for 15 plus years, and using CoStar, and they do a great job with a lot of information, and we both agree on that. One of the things I think is tough, really hard, is the tenant information, and to keep that updated with the right people and the right companies in the right space, because they're moving all the time, and not only people are moving, but the companies are moving. Do you hear that from other brokerage firms across the country, that the tenant information is the most difficult?
That's always been a challenge. I mean, even when I was at CoStar, they spend tremendous amount of resources trying to track tenant data. It's just hard to do. Yeah. There's no reliable way to do it. Change of address, all these sort of tricks and things that they rely on for notifications that either a tenant has moved out or somebody has moved in, just don't work. So short of physically being in buildings and understanding who's there, it's hard to do that on a big grand basis, which is another reason why, you have an advantage in a market over somebody like, say, in Orange County trying to do a deal in San Diego, just using, a research system.
Yeah, I'm calling the show here Market Knowledge, for that reason, really, is, as we kind of look across the country and some of these larger firms, some of the real value is that local knowledge and the local relationships. And it's kind of what you're saying here. So lastly, I know that you've got a building in Carlsbad. So I've got one location in Carlsbad. How do you feel about that Carlsbad market? I think it's fantastic. It's got a great little tech feel to it too, and you got some gamers up there, and you're really seeing some growth there. It's not a market that I was familiar with prior to the LightBox acquisition. So I had a choice to go to either Irvine or Carlsbad, and I decided to spend more time down in Carlsbad. And it's invigorating to me. The building that we're in is this phenomenal customized space with a gaming company next door, an Italian family-run Italian restaurant in the building, a gym coming. The owner spent considerable money over the last year during the pandemic with a whole infrastructure retrofit, redoing the parking lot, restriping. I mean, a lot of amazing work. So they're obviously optimistic about the growth and the excitement in the market. The question is whether people are going to come back to the offices or not in as full of force as they did before, or whether this sort of interaction is going to become more and more common. I mean, we were talking about that earlier before our call, which is this sort of way you present yourself in a video environment is a big reflection on your professional kind of capability. So, you do it well. You have a very, you have a great angle in the office, your lighting's done, your audio's great, your video's good. So you come off to me very professionally. But I've had lots of vendor presentations from people trying to sell us stuff where, their audio is poor and their video is bad and their faces are dark, and they just don't understand the perception that casts these days. So I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful that Carlsbad and in California in general starts to rev up again, but we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I love doing this, but I'd rather we go grab a cup of coffee or a beer or something. For me, that's the best way to go. So I'm hopeful it'll come back as well. Last thing, what is with the show, I try and be as helpful as possible to anybody who is listening. What's the one thing that you do every day that kind of keeps you focused? Maybe it's meditation or working out or spending time with the kids. What's the one thing that you really point to that you have to do every day?
With me, it's just my routine. I have a very structured routine that starts at 4:30 and it's working out, and then it's meditating, and then it's working out again, and all before the family gets up. So I that's my way of like having carved out some personal success every day that helps me feel like, okay, I'm doing more than most people. And it makes me, it's empowering, and it's certainly healthy. And I've been doing it for years and years, and it's a lifestyle.
It's working, right?
Yep.
Well, Michael, thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. All the knowledge that you put out here for us has been fantastic, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Great, Bob. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.